Hey everybody, it's Christian from 229 Live. I just want to say real quick, I hope that you and your family are well right now. This video series is called We Live Here, so go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so that you can get the latest videos as soon as they come out. And with that, I'll let you get back to this video.
Dr. Tripp Morgan of Pretoria Fields, thank you for joining me today. I know that we are separate, but we're able to join each other through the magic of the internet, and really thankful for that. What I'd like to do just from the start is kind of get your origin story. You are the founder and creator of Pretoria Fields and everything that has turned into over the years. I'd like to just kind of give you the moment here to kind of share, like, what was your origin story before Pretoria Fields, and then how have you progressed since then? Kind of leave it wide open for you.
Right. Well, thank you, Christian. And yeah, this is fun. I haven't done this. Well, I haven't done it in a pandemic in a warehouse before, so I can say that. But no, I was a physician by training. Actually, I was a pharmacist. My dad and my sister are both pharmacists, so I went to pharmacy school, and then from there fell in love with medicine, and from there fell in love with surgery, and from there fell in love with vascular surgery. So it was a long road, but so I'm boarded in both general and vascular surgery. But I'm actually from the Albany area. I have a lot of relatives that are from Albany, but I'm from the Albany area. I'm from a small town called Camilla, which is just south of here, and grew up there. And so my dad grew up on a farm and grew up farming, and we had a family farm forever. He was a pharmacist, and then once he retired from pharmacy, we started farming together. So we were doing corn, cotton, and peanuts on a farm that we owned in Camilla. I got one in Albany. I attained another piece of land in Albany. So we were doing between 400 and 600 acres. And honestly, it's hard to make a living. There's this in those particular crops unless you have quite a number of acres. So the break even point is right at 600 acres. And so we were looking at things that maybe would make more money on a smaller scale, and that we could really do that because of the medical part. I was interested in something called functional medicine, where we really try to do more. I mean, if you call it Whole30 or any of the clean food type things. And so the idea was, well, could we promote that in South Georgia, and could we promote organic farming, and at the same time promote what we were doing on our farm in Doherty County. And that's how the idea of the brewery came up. And so Omaha was doing their thing over near Columbus. They seemed to be successful in their area. So our idea was, let's have a small brewery and grow, the majority of what our products were that we go through, that we put our put throughs. That turned into when the Downtown Development Authority found out about our project, it turned into a much bigger project. They invested money into it. They gave us a couple of buildings downtown. We purchased a couple of buildings, and that's how Pretoria Fields Collective started. With that, our little project turned into a much bigger project, to say the least. With the idea that our initial thing was, well, we'll just, our basic business plan was to have people out on our farm, and really do most of what we did with the Taproom. And then the business plan turned into more of a distribution business plan, meaning that with more of a larger facility, and being able to produce more, really trying not only to hit our market but surrounding markets. And then of course all of that has gone haywire with what's going on with the pandemic in the last few weeks.
So going from the farm to producing beer at scale, that with large distribution, take me back to the point where you or someone said, "What if we brew beer instead?"
So I guess it really was me, and uh, and the idea was, well, we're going to do organic farming. How do we get added value for the products that we're producing? So there's not a huge, you know, so the commodities market, so corn, cotton, and peanuts. If you produce yields, you can definitely say, I'm going to get X dollars per bushel for corn, X dollars per pound for cotton, X dollars per bushel for peanuts. And so, but as far as the organic markets go, that doesn't exist so much. So you really have to go and create or find your market. Now, if you find the right and you can produce well, then there's added value there. But ours was more of trying. Our idea was to try to increase those markets moving forward, and also kind of bring people to us to buy our. So we're growing organic blueberries and organic blackberries. Well, let's don't try to go out and sell them. Let's have the people come to us and buy them there on our property. And oh yeah, let's also give them a glass of beer. And oh yeah, hopefully they'll have a good experience and take that away from enjoying our farm. And so that was a pretty easy translation into trying to do the same thing downtown. Now we don't have the farm experience really set up yet, but I think we have a beautiful tap room. I mean, and we have a really, really good staff that's good at telling the story of the farm and really putting that particular part out there. So I think we've done a good job of telling our story locally. Our biggest issue has been, how do we tell our story to more of a broader base? Because I think it resonates. I mean, it's definitely a hometown story. It definitely comes from the heart. I mean, it was something that we love, that we've, been in our family for years, and that we really wanted, that we have a passion for the particular things that we're doing. And so as far as, yeah, I mean, I guess it was me and Dad and Albert Etheridge um, who said, well, this could be a lot bigger.
Okay. And so what you're saying is, not only was the farm plus the beer a nice idea, it actually made good business sense from a sustainability, not just farming sustainability, but from business sustainability viewpoint.
Well, that's definitely, we were trying to get, so let's say, and I'm just guessing, normal blueberries sell for $8, and $8 a small box. We could sell organic blueberries for $12 to $15 a small box, depending on a box, depending on the market. And so, there's a 40 plus percent increase in profitability there. Well, then you take that, you juice it, and you put it in a beer, and the profit goes up even more. And
And
so
that's
that,
from an organic standpoint,
uh-huh.
because of the reduced yields from organic, um, turns into a little bit higher cost. However, there's margins in business, in that business specifically,
That's
that you can
exactly right.
work with. Okay.
I don't know that, we really utilize it more for the story. And I tell our folks that if we're not, we don't really make beer. What we do is we tell the story of organic agriculture, sustainable farming practices, and good use of natural resources, or appropriate use of natural resources. And so if we're telling that story, then we're doing our job. People will migrate to our brand, and our brand will become bigger. And then, that's how we sell our beer, but we sell our story through the beer. And so we don't really, I don't consider, we're in the storytelling business. We're not really we are in the beer business. So that, it's not like I'm stupid, but but if we don't tell that story, then we're no different than there's 80 something, or there were scheduled to be 80 something breweries in the state of Georgia this year. So, if we just open a tap room in Albany, Georgia, we're really no different than anybody else. But we are different. I mean, 80% of what we grow, 80% of our inputs comes from our farm or surrounding farms in the state of Georgia. And we spend a lot of time, effort, and talent uh, to be able to make that happen. I mean, everything from from the researching the types of barley that would do well here in South Georgia, because those varieties are different than the types that do well in the Midwest.
Hmm. Yeah, there's so many complexities when it comes to those parts of the beer making process and the farming process. But I wanted to touch on what you just said about telling your story. You're absolutely right. Especially if you're trying to expand your reach as a brand, I completely back that, and I, um, in part, operate a little on that myself. And so I do completely understand what you're talking about from that perspective. Um, what I'd like to touch on at this point is give me a little bit of the story when it comes to um, your background in well, not necessarily the background, but you know, part of, and I know we didn't exactly discuss this previously, but this series is called "We Live Here,"
Hmm.
and tell me about some of the differences or some of the aspects of growing up in Camilla, and being um, in a farming region, and how farming has kind of you know evolved over like the last few decades.
Sure. Well, so well, the one thing about growing up in Camilla is everything rotates around it, right? So our number one industry in the state of Georgia is still farming. The number one industry in Southwest Georgia is definitely farming. And most of the industries that are related here, not all, but a lot, are here because of some either natural resource associated with our region, um, or easy commodity that's easy to get because they're down here. And so I would say, that was it. I mean, our years sort of rotated around those things. No, my dad was a pharmacist, so it wasn't like, uh, well, actually, it was like that. So yeah, I mean, I guess when one thing is when I was growing up, dad's farm was his hobby and my job. And now that I've gotten older, I won't say that I would say that it's actually turned into a job for both me and him, because he's one of my main farmers. So he retired from his pharmacy job and became our farmer up here. But I don't think, you know how has it changed over the past few years. I think um, everything that's grown has grown under irrigation now, and they've got the technical parts of it, um, with the state, with so industrial farming has the technical components of farming down literally to a science to be able to increase their yields. And I would never talk bad about them, um, because I mean, without that industrial farming component, we wouldn't be able to feed the 300 million people. Plus, we feed ourselves. Plus, we feed another good portion of the world. But at the same instance, the medical part of it, I know that because of the use of organophosphates and all the chemical components, that we've made ourselves sick. And so over the time period, let's say the 1960s and 70s up until now, we've increased our expenditure in medicine astronomically, and yet chronic disease continues to grow. And so why is that? I think one of the main reasons, and this goes back to the functional medicine component, is that the food that we produce when not consumed, when you don't eat correctly, is increasing the amount of chronic disease that we have in the U.S. as patients get older. An interesting study that the CDC did was, if you look at babies born today, they have almost 300 chemicals in their body that they test. I think they tested for a couple of thousand on this particular study, but they have on average 200 to 300 different chemicals that aren't supposed to be there at all. I mean, they're not supposed to be inside your system. So they're man-made. And so the idea there is not, so one of the things you hear is X is okay, or this is okay, or these particular things. But it's probably not that each individual one is bad, but your body can't handle a chemical load of 200 or 300 different things. I mean, it's actually really good at detoxifying things. I mean, when we were roaming around out in the jungles, I mean, plants are produce a lot of toxic chemicals. So we are adapted at being able to deal with that. But then as you get older, you're nutritionally depleted, and you get a combination of 100 other chemicals that aren't supposed to be there. That system can become overwhelmed, and then next thing you know, you're hypertensive, you're diabetic, you've got all kinds of autoimmune diseases. And so I sort of lost my train of thought. But the point being is that industrial farming has fed the world, but at the same time, it's also making us sick. And so, our mantra is, how can we change that for the better, and do it slowly, so that maybe we can change the practices of the industrial farmer, so that they continue to be able to produce that level of produce at that level of quantities, but yet do it so that the food itself is healthier.
Right. That's, I'm glad that you're the one talking about the complexities here, because you have that background not only as um, a person who has, started this company for beer, but also in farming, and then also in um, with a pharmaceutical background. Um, what I'd like to do is kind of latch that onto the brewery at Pretoria Fields and bring us kind of back to the beer. Um, and this is something that, kind of comes into the farming, but when it comes to the ingredients and the parts and the process of what goes into Pretoria Fields beer, how do you take those principles that you were just talking about and apply it into Pretoria Fields?
So let's just start with our core beers. Um, Sholey, Skywater, Walker Station Stout, and our Goza. So the beer that I was most proud of when we started, so it's taken us 2.5 years to get up to that 80% number, right? But the beer that we started out with that was closest was our Goza. And Gozas are named, they're a sour beer. They're sour. We kettle sour with lactobacillus. And then they're fermented. Then it's fermented once for Goza, and then twice for our fruited Gozas. So strawberries, blackberries, blueberries. So we have what we call our farmhouse series, in which for our sour beers. And so our Gozas started out. It's our berry wheat, which means non-malted wheat, coriander, sea salt. And so the ingredients for Gozas are pretty low anyway, or there's not that many of them as compared to some of the other things that we do. So the wheat that we put in it were grown out in the farm. So the first farm, so that was the first one, and that was pretty easy. The main ingredient for beer, of course, is barley. And so it took us a couple of years to be able to get yields for barley to be able. So So barley has to be grown, then it has to be shipped to North Carolina and be malted. And then, you have uh, different components of malting, or different stages, meaning it can be a lighter stage or it can be a darker beer. So the clarity of the beer depends on what malt you use. Clarity is not the right word. The color of the beer, the actual, whether it's a light color or whether it's a dark beer. And so we had to get that process established. And so, but once we got barley, because barley's the main component, we could get it, then suddenly Walker Station Stout and Skywater, and even to a small extent Sholey, all had large components of it that were coming from the farms, not only our farm but surrounding farms. And so that was the biggest component that changed, so that so that we could say that the largest percentage was there. But then other things, like, so we'll just meet with the brewmaster and tell them these are the things that we're growing, give them an idea of how to be um, uh, what sort of, it's just like a restaurant. So here are the tools that we have, or here are your inputs, and then they have their artistic talent, and they take it and run with it.
So when you got the wheat and the barley, did that bring you over like 40%, 50% of the ingredients coming from your farm in the beer at that time, back
Oh,
then?
oh yeah. So about 8 months ago, we started getting in. Um, we started getting the malt barley back from the malt house, and so that's when the inputs really became mostly from our farm.
And you got to 80% with which beer?
Almost all of them at this point. So Skywater for sure. Now there's Skywater also has corn in it, so the corn itself is malted, but that comes from a different maltster. Um, the gozes are 100% from our farms, and most of the fruit that's in there is organic. And then various others, and most of those have just been served in the tap rooms.
Okay.
They even did a dandelion beer where they went out and picked all the wild dandelions. So that was pretty cool. We have a hop project, which literally in our case means we're growing Cascade hops. Cascade was made famous because of the Sierra Nevada's signature pale ale uses Cascade hops. And so it's a hardy variety. It grows almost anywhere, and it's done pretty well out at our farm. So we, at least once a year, we have a wet hop beer. Wet hop means we take it right off the vine and they brew with it. So that's pretty cool.
Okay, that is pretty cool. I wanna hop from the beer part of Pretoria into another part of Pretoria and the story that Pretoria shares, not just here but everywhere, and that is the podcast that you run. Tell me about you know what that was like starting up the podcast, and why you're what was the I guess the purpose behind it, and where you want to go with it.
Yeah. Um, well, the purpose really was non-traditional media, and this idea of how do you tell your story? How do you get your story out there without TV and traditional TV and radio? Because obviously those things aren't. You can't go out and buy a bunch of commercials in large markets. It's the cost of it's not feasible, and plus it's not. A 1 minute soundbite or a 30-second commercial um, doesn't do justice to what we just went over. The beauty of the podcast is what you and I just did. That is exactly the story that we want to get, and we want to be able to communicate and connect with people who would be our customers. That was the idea there. And I basically didn't turn on the TV anymore, because I was constantly getting all my information from Joe Rogan, or I don't know, probably the top 5 Jocko Wilkins or uh, I'm blanking on the names now, but I probably have 5 or 6 um, 6 in areas that I'm interested in of guys that I just listen to. And I was like, well, how do we communicate that? And I'm sure the first 3 or 4 are just bad. I haven't gone back and listened to them, but I'm sure I said, well, let's do 6 and we'll see how it goes. And, if we get X number of listeners, then we'll keep doing it. And I think it's, we've got a couple that I did a book review with, um, with one of our friends, and I think that one has like almost 30,000 views. So it so yeah, so that's sort of how the idea is. Just let's be able to tell the story. And plus we have the natural resource component of it. We have a relationship with Flint River Keeper and Gordon and his group. And so it was a way that we weren't necessarily, it's not Pretoria podcast, it's No Dams Given podcast, which the idea that we could sort of expand off of. It doesn't have to be all beer topics. It's really topics that I like to talk about and topics that have kind of go along with this sustainable resource component. And so it's, we've had a guy come on, and one of the professors out at Albany State talk about artificial intelligence. We've done some religion things. I mean, it's a potpourri of different topics, but I mean, a little bit for everybody maybe. But the overarching idea is continue to have some sort of continue to get back to the promoting the ideas of healthy living with organic foods, good use of natural resources, and support of the community through individual effort. And so, I mean, and I think those are the things we've tried to support.
Yeah, and when it comes to, you mentioned the name, how did you come up with the name No Dams Given podcast? How did you say, hey, this is it. This is
This
going to
is
be the
it.
one.
Yeah. So we're sitting around, we're sitting around talking about beer names, and this was like a year before the podcast came out, and shoal bass, and we were going over shoaly and why, because the shoal bass is indigenous to the Flint River and the Okmulgee River, and so it's sort of our fish, which the shoaly is hopefully our beer, but it needs a long area of non-dammed stream for it to flourish. It actually migrates up and down the river, and it has a relationship to a certain type of mussel, and if it's not, the mussel doesn't get in the gills, then the eggs don't attach, and then they're not moved to the appropriate part. So I mean, so somebody goes, no dams given, and we just kind of stuck with it. So it's really, and it's a ironic component to the fact that we really do give a damn about all of what we're doing, and not only that, but we're putting ourselves out there uh, to try to have some sort of impact on these things.
Okay, yeah, that's a cool story for the name of the podcast. I want to get back to the uh, kind of the beginnings of the brewery, and this might be a fun little segment here. Um, if you were to look back on your process of developing the brewery and the beers, what's like one or two things that you wish you knew before that you know now as a beer brewer, as a business that brews beer?
Well, so, oh my gosh. So I call it, you always pay for your education. And so, I hadn't been in the, I know a lot of the science component of it. I won't say that I technically can go in and start turning knobs, because that's a definitely a trade that those guys are experts at. Um, but that doesn't translate into a business. I mean, you can make the best beer in the world and it not get out to anybody. I mean, it's one of those things in business that doesn't seem like it should be true, but it is true. I mean, it's really hard to um, to have a concept and then take it to fruition, and then even once you get everything built, being able to execute that into sales marketing on a regional basis. It's really, it's really a slow process, a never-ending process of relationship building, and growing those things slowly over a long period of time. Uh, it was the market. So what you only see in hindsight was that 6 years, or so it took 5 years from conceiving of the idea to actually create, making our first glass of beer. And 5 years previously, there were probably only 30 to 40 breweries in the state of Georgia. Okay, craft breweries. Well, we tripled that by the time we actually got open. So it wasn't nearly as good an idea when we were opened as it was when we conceived of it. You don't ever know that. I mean, the market had just gotten, everybody had the same idea at the same time. Um, and so we have something in the state of Georgia called the 3-tier law. And the 3-tier law means you can, and there's a little bit of overlap because it's complicated, but you either manufacture, you distribute, or you sell. Okay. So you either make beer, you move beer around, or you have a bar, or you have a liquor store, or you have a convenience store, or where a grocery store, you sell beer. Okay.
Mhm.
So the understanding the distributor relationship is probably the technically most difficult thing to really wrap your brain around, from a business standpoint, especially from an entrepreneurial standpoint. Because most entrepreneurs would be like, "Oh, well, I just need to buy a bunch of trucks and I'll move it from here to there." Well, no, you can't do that. You've got to make friends with your distributor and make sure that he's there. And then you still need a sales force on the other end to be able to move, to be able to have pull through, they call it, from the manufacturing all the way up to sales. And so really understanding that relationship, and then because understanding that and market capacity really determines kind of what your size should be or would be. And so that's been a difficult hurdle to overcome. Um, but you live and you learn.
And getting to the 3 tiers rule in Georgia, um, you know, part of that process was Georgia's state laws actually changing um, towards your favor. If I think I have that correct. I
Yeah.
remember when
So
that changed.
right, it's still pretty draconian. I mean, from a distribution standpoint, and I say that with all due respect to the distributors. But what they changed a few years ago was that it used to that you weren't supposed to have a tap room, and so the part of the law that changed was that the tap room could actually sell glasses of beer. Okay, so before 2015, in 2015 and earlier, then you could sell tours, and you could give away 6 glasses of beer.
Mhm.
Okay. And then I think you could also sell, I don't know, there was some weird rule where you could also sell a 12 pack or something to go at the end. But it wasn't, but it was very limited on what you could do where you were. So almost all business plans at that point were based on distribution.
Right.
I mean,
Okay.
just simply because it was hard to move enough beer through your tap room. Well, as soon as the law changed, then tap rooms started pop up all over, really with people not choosing the distribution uh, flow really, or business plan model, really more choosing the tap room model.
And so and that makes sense. Like the distribution from a business standpoint, if you set it up correctly, is going to allow you to succeed and grow um, at a faster rate. The tap room is a different type of um, scenario where you're actually, instead of just, hey, we have this product and we can get it out, rather you're saying we're a destination and you should come visit because we're special in this way or that way.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, it's not a bar, but it is a bar. I mean, it's a tap room, but it's a bar. So people come there, they enjoy the beers, they have a great experience, and then we hope that they go buy our products at their local restaurant, their grocery store, those places. So,
Hmm.
and when we hope to expand that experience out to the farm and the other things as we grow.
So give me, that's a really great statement right there. So give me kind of your hopeful outlook, what your plans are for, expanding everything that you currently have, or just, in general, you know, kind of leaning more maybe into the farm, maybe it's leaning more into other things. What is it that you have on tap, if I'll use that phrase, that you can talk about right now that you're excited about?
Well, we've got huge plans, and we had a huge plan going into this spring, and we've sort of stalled here for a little bit. But as soon as things get cranked back up, we have plans for two or three different types of experiences that people can enjoy. So one we're calling our field houses, and field houses will be where we're partnering in various areas. So one would be in McDonough. I've got a friend of mine in Dublin that's putting one in. And so they're smaller versions or brew pub versions of our tap room. They will also have kind of farm to table restaurants that are there, so to continue with the same formula, meaning kind of showcase organic agriculture, showcase sustainable good farming practices in the region, showcase those farmers with the beer to glass, beer to glass, beer to glass, farm to glass or farm to table recipe, and doing those things hopefully make us local in not just the Southwest Georgia area, but in multiple areas both around the state and throughout the region. We want to expand on the initial idea, which is get our tap room and sort of farm experience together so that people can come down, they can tour the hops, have a nice experience out on the farm, enjoy beers, maybe beers that were specifically brewed there, and then and really get a feel for the agricultural component. Maybe there's an educational component that goes along with that, and sort of the understanding of and continue to promote that organic ideal. Um, we've also gotten heavily into the hemp business, and so our part of what the collective is doing right now is we've opened our extraction facility. We'll be growing 10 acres of hemp out on the farm, and we'll have a vertically integrated CBD business. And so bringing that back into it's not okay right now, but eventually it'll be okay to have those in the beers and have different tastes there, um, uh, and different hemp related products. So really excited about sort of those three components of expansion.
Okay, so take me into the place you're at right now. It looks like you're at a warehouse. Are you on the farm right now? And what's
No.
what?
So we got into so 4 weeks ago we were looking at having to kind of lay everybody off. We're a smaller brewery, which means and goes back into the distribution problem or system. We really weren't getting a lot of pull through for or demand for our beers right now. And so there was no use brewing if we're not getting any orders, and we had to shut the tap room down because of social distancing. um, well uh, Someone came up with the idea of hand sanitizer, and next thing you know, everybody was asking for it, and it's kept us open over the past 4 weeks. But now hopefully we're starting to come out of this. We've got to have a place to put all the new Uh, we've got jugs and bottles and really all of the things that we had to buy to be able to make hand sanitizer. And I'm over in a warehouse looking to store it. So I didn't think it was going to take as long as it did. So that's the reason I'm sitting here. But yeah, no, it's a new warehouse that we purchased. We're also going to use it to store hemp in and do some other. We got other uses for it. But right now it's just, I don't know if you can see, it's a cotton warehouse. It's big
Okay,
bale.
nice.
Anyway, yeah,
Well, I'm glad to hear that you can put it to current and future use for being able to store the things that you need to store
sure.
as you go along.
Yeah, well, that's one thing we've learned. You can't ever have enough storage space. As we keep growing. We'll grow into something, and then we immediately grow out of it. So you go, oh, this will be fine. We won't need anything for a while, and then suddenly you're looking around and everything is full. So it's a good problem to have.
Yeah. Oh, I can see that, especially if you're growing. And I know that right now is a difficult time. A lot of things are not open. I know that that has affected the distribution of beer because of uh, business closures, because of social distancing. It has really affected a whole lot of things, and I know that's not necessarily the topic of this discussion, but it is the it is the world that we're living in right now, and so it's definitely, whether it's from a business perspective or whether it's from a personal perspective, um, you know, we need to be aware, and I think that it's good to know where you are now, so that in 6 months, so that in 1 year and in 18 months, we can look back and say, oh wow, we this uh I'm glad we made it through. I'm glad we were able to take this
Sure,
step or take that step.
right. And we'll see. I don't know. I think it's a crazy world. I think it's completely changed, like how we'll see things and how we'll do things going forward. So um, I hope not, but I think it will. So
Yeah, we'll see. Well, I think I've I've probably exhausted all of my questions for you, but I do want to say again, thank you so much for taking this time and chatting with me, in this video. And I think that, first of all, I have a better understanding and a better respect for everything that you do. And I think that anybody who is able to watch this, who maybe knows you a little bit or doesn't know you at all, will also be able to have a greater understanding for what you're doing with Pretoria Fields Collective as a whole, as well as, some of the individual parts that we've been able to talk about.
yeah, well, I appreciate it. Yeah, it was fun. I mean, it's been hectic, crazy days, and we haven't been able to do the podcast for a few weeks. So it's actually this is fun. I like doing it. Um, so it was a good break.
I hear that. I hear that definitely. Well, Tripp, thank you again, and I hope that you and the rest of everybody take care.
Yes,
And
sir.
we'll have to do this again next time, maybe in person.
Yeah, definitely. And stay safe.
All right, you too as well.
All right, thanks, buddy. Bye bye.